Okay, y'all are gonna work with me because I gotta kind of work with both hands here. So this is gonna be real interesting. So if I click a couple times or if I drop the mic, y'all can give me a little grace, okay? Okay, my name is Rochelle Matthews-Somerville, and I am one of the educational resource specialists at HSLDA, and I am super excited to be back here. Flourish is one of my very favorite places to come back to. I have been here for, I want to say this is my third year coming back to Flourish, and this is like home. It's like home. I am, okay, so tell me where, okay, hold on. I'm gonna get the clicker too. We're gonna get this down. So I am not only a resource specialist with HSLDA, I am authentically a homeschool mama. So this is not my classroom, this is my home. So these are all my babies. So if you have little ones, I was once there, but now my babies have grown up. So this is what I call my party of 8. I have 6 kids, 5 boys, and 1 princess. And so my youngest right now is 5th grade, and then I have an 8th grader. Twins are 15, and then I have successfully launched the oldest 2. My daughter, we graduated last year, and then my son is a senior in college. And so it has been a journey. Thank you. Thank you. It has definitely been a journey. Throughout this journey, we actually chose to homeschool. We were not running from anything. Rather, we were running towards something because that love of learning. From the time that my oldest was little, that passion for learning is what I wanted to keep going. And so basically doing that, just that eclectic kind of learning on the road, that's what we were going for. I wanted to still see that spark in his eye. And then after that, that was all he wrote. He loved learning. And so that's basically why I continue to homeschool. And my background is actually in special education. Prior to homeschooling full-time, I was a full-time university professor. And so I became a tenured professor, and I actually stayed at the university for many, many years after having kids. I stayed there until number 5, and then it was almost like overfloweth the cup. I had to make a decision. And so I have since then decided to pour all of my energy and expertise into the homeschool world. And so that's basically what I've done. And I have spent it working on resources and showing families that have neurodivergent children that they too can successfully homeschool their kids. And so that's where I spent most of my time. So, okay, there we go. We're gonna get it together. Just work with me. I told you, a little grace. There we go. Okay, now, how many of you all have children who are identified with a special need? Okay. How many of you all have a struggling learner that's not identified? Okay. So interestingly, even if you have a learner who is not identified, you may resonate a lot with this, with what we're going to talk about, because a lot of times when we homeschool, you don't actually have to be labeled to do a lot of things that are just to put a lot of really good strategies in place. Some of my kids are identified. And some are not, because we have lots of the expertise, our friends, and we do a lot of things. Like, for example, my sister is a speech language pathologist, and so my youngest 2 have always received speech, but they're not labeled. But when they were very, very young, a lot of the youngest 2 had very, very difficulties with lisp and a lot of the sounds. They weren't making those sounds, but now you couldn't really tell. My oldest 2, a lot of ADHD, a lot of organizational difficulties, and executive functioning difficulties. I think it just runs in the family. I tell my husband, you got to tell me something. What was going on when you were little? I say it all the time, but no, just kidding. So when it comes to neurodivergent children, they don't necessarily need to be labeled in order for you to serve them. Oh, I see some laughing over here. So a lot of times, if you have a child who was coming from the public school system, they got a lot of support. But a lot of times we don't necessarily know what everything they got because we throw a lot of terms in you. So what I like to do is I like to start off with a lot of those common questions relate to all those terminologies and acronyms and things that were talked about. What's an IEP, an SEP, an IHEP? So let's get that off and talk about that first. And who needs one? When you homeschool, do you have to have one? What are the requirements? And what documentation is actually required for actual homeschoolers? And so that's actually important. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit. I'm struggling with this clicker. Sorry, guys. Okay. And then, so the goals for today are basically to talk about and define all of those common terms that we like to throw around in the field of special education. But then let's talk about that plan. What does it take to successfully homeschool? How many people have heard of a student education plan? Okay. A student education plan is that plan that we put in place for students with special needs when they are homeschooled. So we no longer refer to IEPs necessarily. It's a student education plan. And we're going to talk about what are the components of a student education plan. And then I actually do have some samples of a student education plan and some resources that you can use to actually put it together. All right, so when you are actually, when your child is actually in school, an IEP basically refers to that individualized education plan. So if you've ever had a child that had an IEP is nothing more than that document that allows you to individualize that education plan. It talks about the services they're going to receive if they had speech or OT or PT. If they were in a private school, it may be called an individual service plan or a 504 plan. Means they don't necessarily need the work easier or modified, but they do need some type of accommodations. And so a lot of times they receive 504 plans. And a 504 plan is not necessarily making the content easier. It's basically giving them accommodations to what we call even the playing field. Like, for example, you wouldn't expect a football player to go out on the field without a helmet. So it's similar to basically giving them what they need to access the content. Okay, so so a student education plan. A student education plan is the equivalent of an IEP. Okay, so your IEP basically is that plan that students receive when they are in public school, and it outlines exactly what services they will receive. If you are in some areas, or if you ever hear of an IHEP, which is an individualized home education plan, it's exactly the same. It's just a different term used in different particular regions. Next slide. So what makes an SEP unique? Okay, so sometimes when we homeschool, you think, well, why would I need an SEP? Okay, because when you homeschool, the idea is that you individualize anyway. Okay, but sometimes we refer to an SEP as an individualized excellent program, and when you think about it, you are going to think about looking at the unique learning styles of your child when you're putting this together. What does it take to identify those current levels of performance? These are all the things you think about when you're putting this together and how you're going to individualize this plan. And we're going to dig some more into this in a second. You're going to incorporate the therapies into this plan. it's going to be an excellent plan for your individual child because you're going to think about the environment. And so it's not just an environment that you have to take. You're going to think about your individual environment. How are you going to engage your child in the planning? Your child doesn't have to fit into an environment. You're now going to create a plan that your child actually is already in. And so unlike the school system where this is the classroom, your child has to fit into this particular schedule, you're almost going to do it the other way around. And the expectations in itself are almost what makes this an excellent plan. Okay, so for example, if in a typical situation, you know that your child doesn't really have a very big or long attention span, you're going to accommodate for that in this particular plan. So I tell people all the time, I have a 15-year-old with ADHD, and he is the one that I'm like a magician with him. All of my professional skills come out. Because if you walk into my house, you'll say there's no way that's homeschooling. But it has absolutely worked for him. He is up, he is down, he is up, he is down. And so we are constantly working on it, but talk to him. He's on point. He's on point, but it doesn't look traditional at all. At all. And so part of it is changing your mindset to make it work for the child. It is not going to look like anything traditional. And so almost, I tell people, the first thing you have to do is filter the noise. Because other people are going to have lots of opinions if you have a neurodivergent child. And you're creating a program that's going to work for your child. It's going to look very different. I cannot have my child sit for an hour. That's just not going to work. Nothing is going to happen if I make him sit for an hour. He ends up spending all of his energy thinking about sitting. That's where all of his energy goes, into what it looks like to sit. I tell the story all the time. With my oldest child, when he was in kindergarten, when I first started homeschooling, I had this idea of what kindergarten looked like. You sit in a chair, you do your work, your paper and pencil, or even if you take out some manipulatives. And so I had him sit in the chair, and I couldn't get anything out of him. I'm a teacher, right? So I couldn't understand what was happening. I am the teacher. I know how to make it fun. I pulled out the different tools and the manipulatives, and I couldn't get anything out of him. And I'd turn around, and he was under the table. And so I just couldn't understand. I couldn't understand what was happening. I trained teachers. That's what I did. And so for the longest time, it was months in. And so finally, one day, I found myself getting frustrated. And so I did. I admit I got a little antsy with him, and I yelled, and I said, "You're not listening." I said, "Get from under the table." And he said, "But Mom, what do you want?" And I said, "You're not listening to me." And he said, "Well, I heard what you said." I said, "You're under the table. How could you hear what I said?" And he said, "Well, what's the question?" And I asked him the question, and he gave me the answer. I kind of stopped. And I said, "But, okay, well," and I asked him another question. And he answered me. And I said, "Okay, no. And I looked under the table, and I asked him another question. And he answered me. And guess what I did? I crawled right under the table with him, and that's where we schooled the rest of kindergarten. Okay? Because what I learned is that when I put him in a chair, he didn't do anything. I couldn't get anything out of him because he was so focused on what it looked like that he couldn't think. And so, he has to move. That's what I learned. He has to move, but that was him. And so I had to work with the way he learned. And that's hard to do because even at 15, I still have to remind myself when I get frustrated, he does not look like he's paying attention. But as soon as I stop him and I get frustrated, he repeats me, almost verbatim. And when I stop to make him look the part, then all of a sudden he loses it. And so I have to reset myself to remind myself that it's me and not him. And so sometimes in this homeschool journey, we have to reset as adults, and then we will find out that once we reset and kind of shift our mindset, then our kids can fall in place too. And so the program, as you peruse curriculums and things like that, and you pick out the strategies that best work for your child, you're going to find out that it's going to be a schedule, it's going to be an eclectic schedule, and the goals are just going to look very different. Okay, so now, what is the purpose and benefits of an SEP? And people ask me this all the time, because first of all, we already know that homeschooling is a lot of work. And the thing is that it's not required. And so why would you want to sit there and do something that takes more work and it takes more time? And so this is what I always say. There are benefits, and there is a purpose. First of all, I say to people all the time, this is a floor plan, okay? Now, if I told you there is this fabulous house that I saw down the street, and I promise you there is an amazing price tag to it, and I bet you would love it. It's almost dirt cheap. You want it? I promise you it's beautiful. I promise you. Would you want it? Would you want it? It's beautiful, I'm telling you. How many kids do you have? How many? 3? It has 5 bedrooms, and it's a banging master bedroom. And it's got a basement, a finished basement. It's beautiful. Would you want it? But the only catch is you don't get to see it. You just got to trust me. Would you want it? You would buy it? Okay, you buy it. How many other people would buy it? Sight unseen. Okay, you buy it. How many people would say no? Okay, I see a lot of hands. Now, why wouldn't you want to buy it? You haven't seen it, right? Okay, so this is like going into your homeschool journey without seeing the plan, right? So sometimes, now some of us are just going to take the leap of faith, right? She's going to take the leap of faith. She's going to try it. And it may work out well. It may work out well. But a lot of times, you want a plan. You want a plan. You want a sure thing. Because you want to know that if it doesn't start to go well, at least you know how to change it. Because you've seen the plan. Okay, well, I might not like the room over here. Let's put it over here. Or let's put the bathroom in between these two. Or let's have a Jack and Jill bathroom instead of over here. Okay? So at least you have the plan in place. And the other thing, too, is that a lot of time with our neurodivergent learners, their learning is very different than the traditional learner. What do I mean by that? For example, a lot of times, for example, with my daughter, I could just go from the book from the beginning to the end, the curriculum. That was not a problem. Like sometimes I would go a little faster, sometimes I go a little slower, depending on what the chapter was, depending on what the content area was. But with my neurodivergent learner, I could stay in the same place for a very long time. And sometimes I feel like I'm not making progress because there are days where we don't open the book because we got to deal with some character issues, right? It's a character day. It's not a lost day. It's just a character day, okay? And so we get up and we just don't feel like doing anything, right? But that character day is in the plan because we're going to deal with some behavior, and that's one of my goals, right? We are going to deal with accepting authority as a goal. That's just a goal for you. We are not going to talk back. We are going to respect authority. This is an academic goal, this is a behavioral goal. So we have a variety of goals because we are going to move forward. Sometimes we forget and we over-focus on academics when the reality is that there are a lot of other areas that we need to work on other than academics. And when you hyper-focus on academics, sometimes we lose sight of that and we feel like we're standing still. But the reality is we are definitely not standing still. If you have a young kid, we forget that, in this process of kindergarten, you learn to tie your shoes, you learn to pick out your clothes, you learn to brush your teeth, you learn to pick out the correct outfit for the weather. You learned all these things. These are life skills. You learn to empty the dishwasher, but it's not academic. And so, unfortunately, when you hyper-focused on academics, it felt like you stood still. It felt like you didn't actually learn anything. So when you get to the end of the year and they're asking you, what did you learn academically, and you never created an SEP, your answer is, well, we didn't really learn anything. And that's just not true. And so there's a lot of value in creating an SEP. And so the SEP, first of all, is a complete plan. And so that's always a good thing because it gives you the entire picture. It is documentation, so if you ever have to show what you have learned, you've got a full picture. So if your child is doing some type of therapy or something, that's a part of your SEP. And so the other thing too is that, let's say your child is doing speech or your child is having occupational therapy, that's a part of your plan. Because the other thing too is that when you have to do occupational therapy or whether it's virtual or you're going someplace, sometimes we feel like, oh, well, that's not part of the plan. That's not part of the academics. And so when you have to go out the house, that's like half a day. If you have kids, you know that when you leave the house, that day is lost. Like there is no resetting these kids. They're like, woohoo, no school. And you come back and you're like, okay, wait, we got to do school today. You put that in your plan and that is school. Right? And so this is all part of the package. You also are going to put in there long and short-term goals. So we're going to have that long goal. What is the goal for the end of the year? And what do you want to see in a month? Right? And so it's short-term and you have long-term. So it's not that you're not going to make progress or your goal isn't that you have big goals. It's just that right now, this is what I'm focusing on. And so it kind of keeps you moving forward. And the beautiful thing, too, is that everything is in one place now. If you've ever tried to keep documentation, listen, as a homeschooler, I mean, unless you have an organizational system and you put things in one place strategically, you're going to be like a magician. You can be like a magician when you need to find that one piece of paper. And so this is a great way to have all that documentation in one place. And then it also affords you the opportunity to work with others. So this is your opportunity to get your village together, right? We do not homeschool successfully in a bubble. And so this allows you to look for your support team, whether this be your therapist or your community, your co-ops. And so this forces you to actually find your village. Okay, so what are those parts? What are those parts of the SEP? So it looks almost like an IEP. And so you have that section with just your background information. And then you have the summary of your cognitive ability. You have the summary of the academic achievement. And then you're going to have present levels of performance. And then you're going to have where your goals are going to be. And then whether you have accommodations or modifications. The beautiful thing about the components of the SEP is you get to choose what you put in each of these sections. So for example, when you have like an IEP, you don't get to choose what's in there. So the beautiful thing about the SEP is you actually choose what you put in there and what you don't. So for example, if you have background information or you have cognitive information, if your child has ever been tested and you don't think it's accurate or you want your child retested, you don't actually have to put it in there, or you get to choose what to put in there. You could put in that section, see such and such report. Because I don't recommend you put everything in your SEP, simply because you may want to use your SEPs. Say, for example, you're using this for a co-op, right? And you just want your co-op teacher to know, these are the things that I focus on. If you have a co-op teacher that's willing to work with your child, knowing that your child is not academically where they need to be, but they're willing to work with them. So these are the goals we're working on. So if you work with my child has dyslexia, and they may struggle a little bit with writing. So this is kind of what we're working on, and this is what you can expect. That co-op teacher doesn't need to know your whole medical history. And so you may not want that information in your student education plan. And so in that section, you just say, ask for report, or you just have one statement that alludes to the fact that you have it, but it's just not in there. And so that gives you the opportunity to have the information, but not necessarily divulge your whole entire life to everybody. The other thing too is that the SEP is a really good document to have, because some places will ask for it. Like for example, if you are like some therapists will ask what goals you're working on, or you may get discounts for having certain documents, and some people will say, oh, well, that's not a valid document because it's not an IEP that's signed by all these professionals. It's just a mom document or a dad document. And for that, I say, take it right up the street and get it notarized And once it's notarized, they'll say, oh, now that's a valid document. That's the workaround. And the last thing is on your SEP, you're also going to have a list of services. Okay. So on your IEP, you're going to start with present levels of performance. And the wonderful thing is that you get to choose where you're going to get this present level of performance for, okay? So what grade levels your child is on, the strengths and weaknesses that your child has, teaching approaches that you're going to use, what supports, what accommodations you're going to use, what's the preferred learning style of your child, what developmental areas or content areas they need most of the support in. And this is information that you have decided. You can use whatever you want. You can use a curricular-based assessment. Most curriculums come with some type of assessment in the very beginning. And some people say, well, what grade level should I use? That's up to you. If your child is transitioning from public school, you can use, if you feel like what the public school is valid, and you feel like it's a good reflection of what your child was doing, you can use their information. If you think this doesn't even look like my child, then I wouldn't use it. You can do your own types of assessments. And before you leave today, I'm going to give you a listing of just information that you can use to come up with a whole bunch of information where you can retrieve some present levels for yourself all the way through high school. Some of it is, sometimes it's easier to, if you have an older child, like middle school, you could put them on the computer and they can navigate where they will go through a series of questions and at the end is done. Or if you have a child who is more flexible and willing to work with you, younger kids are a little bit easier where you can work with them and they will actually, be willing to work with you. But, middle schoolers are, they're a human species of their own. Love the middle schoolers. Keep going. All right. So this is an example of just a few of the tools that you actually could use. So you could use previous assessments, like I said, or if you wanted to, placement tests. There's lots of free placement tests. It does not have to be anything fancy. You do not have to use standardized tests. Remember, the information that you are going to use is for you. And so you want the information to be useful. So standardized tests are good. But remember, standardized tests are comparative tests, and so basically the scores that you get are just comparing your child to other kids the same age, same grade level. So if you want useful information, that's not really useful in terms of, figuring out where they are. You really want information in terms of how they're going to, what do you need for a curriculum? Where are their holes and gaps? And so a lot of times, standardized information is good. For example, I test my kids at the end of every year. We don't do a lot of testing throughout the year, but it's a good skill to have. So at the end of every year, I do testing for the purpose of testing. Now, I remember the first year I tested my kid, which was probably around maybe fifth grade. But again, it wasn't for the scores, it was for the experience. And my kiddo came out and he's like, Mom, I'm sorry. I said, why? Why? Don't be sorry. And he said, I said, honey, what's the matter? And he said, I couldn't sit that long. And I said, I was thinking he was telling me he escaped the room or something. He said, no, I just drew a design with the bubbles. I said, honey, it's okay. We'll work on it. And that's what his scores looked like. It looked like he drew a design with the bubbles. But, it was an experience. We did it for the experience. And so, if your child doesn't have experience with standardized tests, that's what you do. You need to work up to that. And so we're very much still in the experience stage because he is the kind of kid that needs accommodations. He literally cannot sit that long. He needs breaks. He needs brain breaks. And so remember that whatever you use, the purpose is so that you come out with useful information. So you want to pick a test that helps you. Sometimes it's just observation, okay? You watch your child. How long do they sit? What can they handle? They might be some checklist. What can they handle is a really good question. Where is their threshold of frustration? You may just give them a series of questions. They may be third grade. Like if you're giving them first grade questions, are they really energetic? Second grade questions, it's okay. Third grade questions, they're slowing down, they're pushing back. Fourth grade, they have an attitude. Okay, that's their threshold. Okay, so it may be just a check off and a personality kind of where is their threshold, so you know how you can push them. At fourth grade, they may be okay. So you know that I can push them beyond their grade level, even though it's not about being right or wrong, it's how far can I push them. So you may do some behavioral things to kind of figure out, behavioral personality kind of things. So it depends on what kind of information you want. You can use rubrics, and all of these things you can Google. So remember, as a homeschooler, we are not reinventing the wheel. If you Google rubric, you may get 1,000 hits. You just need to find the one that you need. Somebody has done it before us. Find it. I love that Amber has put all of her stuff together. Somebody has done it for you. Find it. I am an advocate for finding it. So goals and objectives. Okay, let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. What do we do for goals and objectives? Okay, so how do we identify goals and objectives? So your goals are going to be those larger, what do you hope to accomplish? They're more broad. And then your objectives are going to be the smaller, very specific skills that you're trying to get at, those measurable things. And so your goals, for example, are a broader goal might be the student will increase their understanding of number sense by ordering or identifying, comparing. Those are very, very broad goals, okay? But specifically, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get my kid to understand number sense? So I might, given a group of whatever you have, given a group of manipulatives, they're going to count to 20. That's how I'm going to get them to understand number sense, okay? Or I might give them 20 objects and then have them write in correct order, okay? So you have your general, your broad goal, and then how are you going to get there are going to be your objectives. And so you have to remember that we are going to write SMART goals. So specific, measurable, action. You're going to use action words. They're going to be realistic and relevant, and they're going to be time-bound, okay? So specific goals, you want them to be specific because you want them to also be measurable. If I write a goal that says, my child will learn fractions, that sounds like a great goal, but when it comes time to figure out if they've learned them, the problem with that is that, say you were giving your kid a test, and they get 7 out of 10. Have they learned them? So you haven't created it in a way that allows you to measure mastery. And so you want it to be very, very specific, and you want it to be something that is action-based. So learn, again, be careful with that. We love to say the kid will learn things. Learn, you can't really measure it, and so be careful. Or realistic is another one. If you pull your kid out of school and they are not reading or they are struggling with reading, and then your goal is by the end of the year they're going to be on grade level, that's not realistic, right? You want it to be realistic, okay? But here's the great thing too, is that if they're struggling and you give them and you put in front of them what they need that's on their level, 9 times out of 10, eventually they will catch up. Not in the year, but they will catch up because it's just a natural thing. A lot of times they're just not in a place, or they're not using materials that are conducive to their learning, or they're not using strategies that were working for the way that they learn. So when you're drafting goals, as I talked about it in the beginning, when you're drafting an SEP, what you want to remember is that we are trying to grow the whole child, okay? So raising kids is not just about academics. And because we homeschool doesn't mean that we are just teaching them just the academic piece. You want to think about values. What are the attitudes? What are the habits, skills, talents, interests, knowledge? You want to think about all of it, right? Because the reality is that if you think about the most successful people that you could think of, for example, if you think about somebody that's really influential at your church, okay? 9 times out of 10, if you don't think about the fact that, oh man, that lady in church, she's a really good reader. Probably not. It probably has something to do more with her character than it does the fact that, she reads really well, okay? So it tends to be those character things that we think about, right? So we want to remember to grow the whole child. And you can put all of that into your homeschool, right? And so when you're thinking about it, also put it into your SEP and think about it, because that's not wasted time. That's also part of the education that our kids need too. And so when you're thinking about those accommodations, think about what does your kid need? Do you need to adjust the pacing? Do you need to adjust assignments? Or do you need breaks? Does your kid need breaks? Is it self-management? Are they disorganized? What is it that you need to do to individualize this program for your child? That's how you're going to develop your SEP. These are the things that you're going to think about. It's not just the academics. I can't say that enough. I think too often we only focus on the academics and forget about the other things, and sometimes that's how we miss the boat. And I think that's when we feel personally like we are not succeeding as homeschoolers, because the focus is solely on academics when we are nailing it in other areas, but we don't give ourselves credit. And so related services. When you think about related services, this is your village. This is your team. This could be your occupational therapist, your vision specialist, your speech and language pathologist. This is everybody who is going to support you. All the people at your co-op. Keep going. All the people. If your child has anything that they need, it could be a tutor that you've used. It could be anybody that you outsource to. If it's a behavioral specialist, if you have a family member who is teaching one subject for you, this is your village, okay? Even if this is not a paid service. Like I said, my sister was my speech and language pathologist, and I have used, because I came from the university, a lot of my ancillary related service providers were my friends. And so this doesn't have to necessarily be a paid person. In the homeschool world, we find these people, and they tend to be our village. So a lot of times they tend to be at the co-op. You're gonna find amazing people at the co-op, and they may be the experts. And so you're gonna find out also that with the support you receive from your village, they may not need all the things that they were getting from the school system. Keep going. Keep going. So I want you to remember, I love this quote. It says, develop a passion for learning, and if you do, you'll never cease to grow. So that is our job. Our job is not to teach content. Our job is basically to teach a passion for learning. Because if there's a passion for learning, they're going to want more and more and more, okay? And wanting that passion to learn is naturally going to roll over into growth. They're going to continue to just want more and more and more. And it doesn't matter what it is. Wanting to learn equals growth, okay? That's all we want. And so that desire for inquiry is what we want. And so it honestly doesn't matter. I have learned to follow my child's lead, and sometimes we do more. My kids somehow have learned to love STEM, and I think it came with Legos. It all started with Legos. I mean, they would not put down the Legos. They were hiding Legos just to play with them later, hiding them in the bathroom, hiding them under their bed, in their pillows, and that just became much larger. Now, my son is about to graduate with a mechanical engineer degree. My daughter is majoring in math. My son is still hiding Legos in the bathroom. We're in Lego robotics here, and so it all started with Legos, and so following your child's lead. We play math games all the time. When we can't get a subject in, we play games. Now, if I play a math game, they think we didn't do school. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. We just pull out a math game. And so sometimes, it may not be the curriculum. It may be a spelling bee. We'll have a spelling bee. Nope, we're not doing school today, but we're going to do a spelling bee. We're good. So sometimes we're not going to do history. We're going to watch a YouTube video on the Revolutionary War. They're good. They're not doing school. They're watching TV. So sometimes you just got to, you got to work around their minds, and they're good. So, but you know what? That passion for learning is always there. So first, when you're thinking about putting together an SEP, keep it simple. Don't make it elaborate, because the wonderful thing is you can constantly change it and revisit it as much as you want. You are not bound to any type of time. If they master something, you pick the next objective or goal. You can change it and revisit it as much as you want. Begin with what your child can do. Be sure you begin with what they can do. A lot of times we figure out where their holes and gaps are, and we say, okay, they need this, they need this, they need this, they need this, they need this. And you build a whole program around what they can't do. If I spent all my time working on things you can't do, eventually you're going to give up. It's just going to be done. You're not going to want to do it. Start with what they can do, because that builds momentum for wanting more. Don't do it alone. Find your village, because when you get tired, there's somebody else that wants to do it. I have somebody who loves English. Now, every once in a while is fine, but when they hit that middle school and they don't want to do anything, I have that English teacher who loves English, and I have that history teacher who loves history. And so when they come back to me, I can handle it. So find your village. That co-op is wonderful, I send them on off, and I go to another classroom. Find support. We don't homeschool alone. This is why I have 18 years in me. Read and be open to learning from others. Be willing to learn from others. I continue to learn to this day. I can't tell you that I did the same thing twice. And in between there, I have twins. My twins are like night and day. When they were born and they started school, I was excited. I was like, yes, this is like a 2-for-1. I just knew I was going to be able to do the same thing, and they were both going to benefit. No, not at all. With one, if I say the same thing twice, the one is checked out. And if I don't say it twice, the other tells me I never said it. So it just doesn't work. So I didn't get my 2-for-1, but I wouldn't do it differently. I would not do it differently. 18 years in, and I still have about 10 years. So, HSLDA, of course. Are you all familiar with HSLDA? Okay. Anybody a member? All right. Yes. HSLDA is a beautiful resource to anybody who is beginning to homeschool or is at the end of their journey, the middle of their journey. A lot of times with homeschooling, finding the resources is very, very difficult, because if you Google homeschooling, or if you're in the beginning in your journey and you're looking for curriculum, you get about 1,000 hits, right? And it's like, oh, this is exciting, I have options. And it's like, okay, wait, now I have to pick one, right? And so at HSLDA, you go onto their website as a member, you not only have options of curriculums broken down by age levels. So you have the curriculum for young people, you have the curriculum for your middle school, you have the curriculum for high school. But what you also have is we've also loaded things like checklists. Like, how do you find a curriculum for your learner? And it'll say things like, likes to repeat information, okay, this. And once you go through the checklist, here are your options, okay? So it teaches you how to pick curriculum, or what kind of curriculum would be good for your learner. And then, let's say you're plugging along in your curriculum and you get stuck. Okay, there's something else for that. Let's say you're plugging along and now you have a high schooler. You're like, okay, wait a minute, it's transcript time. Okay, well, we have a transcript service. So there's lots of services and support for homeschoolers. And so you definitely want to check out the resources that are available. If you have a special need learner, there are tons and tons of resources. There are also webinars Quite frequently, Lanisser and Natalie and I and Carla, which is another resource specialist, will jump online and we will do webinar series, and we will open it up and people can ask questions. And so you do have, while we don't have one-on-one consultant anymore, we do have sessions and webinars where we open it up, you bring in all your questions, and we take them live. And so we do have that as a resource. Of course, we have our advocacy. If you ever have issues with anything, we have our legal team. So if you ever have questions about your legal rights or what you can and can't do or what you're eligible for, that is a constant with HSLDA. So definitely check out HSLDA. We have our Mom Possible table out here. We have some goodies. If nothing else, make sure you come and check us out and fill out a raffle for our raffle. We also have a table talk where you can stop by and you can talk with one of us tomorrow if you have specific questions. We will each be at a table. Lanisser is high school, and I am special needs. So if you have a specific situation or a case and you just want to chit-chat, make sure you stop by our table talk for tomorrow. All right. You have like one or two questions for me? Any burning questions? Yes. What does the end game look like for a child who has special needs and who's been homeschooled? Well, let me tell you that my oldest child, who is now a senior mechanical engineer, the end game is he's going to graduate. He's a mechanical engineer. My daughter is twice exceptional. She is a double psychology major and a math major, and she graduated high school with an AA degree. So let me tell you that both of their programs looked extremely eclectic. It does not, I worked with them, and it's not easy. We took 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It was designed for them. I think the goal is to figure out who your child is. I always say that there are no limits other than the ones you place in front of them or they place in front of themselves. There are resources for everything. And so find a curriculum that works for them. Take everything you thought school was and throw it out. And then create a program that works for them. If they need a break every 15 minutes, then give them one. As long as they're working and moving forward. We school year-round, and we school, it may be all day long. Not that they're working all day long, but if they choose to break every 15 minutes and work all day long, that's what they do. So they literally have carved out, my kids have carved out what works for them. Some of it's on the computer, some of it's through books. And so it is completely eclectic, but I have literally figured out what works for each of my kids. And there's a variety of speech. One of them has dysgraphia, lots of executive functioning disorders. And so I've had to put a lot of supports in place, lots of breaks. We've got Alexa, dings. Everybody knows their own dings from the alarms and everything. And so I would say, think about your child, make it work for your child, and filter the noise. Yes. Yeah, balancing children with special needs and those without special needs. So my children without special needs, they almost created a schedule for themselves, and they almost became my helpers, because even my children with special needs also had gifts. So there are strengths within kids with special needs. It may not be academics, but their gifts allow them to be helpers. And so you literally have to figure out who your child is. My daughter is twice exceptional, but she always had gifts. She's my only girl, and so she was not organized in academics or she was disorganized in her own life, but she was always able to be a helper to her brothers. And so in one sense, she needed help with organization, but yet she was always able to help me with them. If I gave her a specific task, she couldn't always see it, but she was always able to help if I asked her for something specific. And so although kids with special needs need a lot, if you think about it, they also have gifts. And so I challenge every parent to find their gifts first and work from a strength perspective as opposed to a deficit perspective, because I think that also builds them. And once you build up their self-esteem, then they are willing to accept challenges. But for some kids, I always say that sometimes you need to build them before you work on the hard stuff. Because my one kid, sometimes I just need to reset and build them. And we put it away. Sometimes you put the academics away and you just build them. And then once you build them back up, then you can go back to the academics. And sometimes you do. I've stepped away from the academics. But because I'm not on a time frame, I don't have to start in August and stop in June. It doesn't matter. If I need to go into July, it's okay. And I'm not talking about 9 to 5 in July. I mean, if I need to extend math into July, it's okay. Well, thank you very much. And I do, you know what, when I finish, I have a handout for each of you that I forgot to take out. So I will give you that. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. So the connection between handwriting and reading. So here is what I say. So my sister was my speech and language pathologist, and I tapped into her because I didn't notice the two. So with my kid who has dysgraphia, I did not notice the connection. She was the first one to tell me, because I always, I would say something to her about speech, and she noticed the handwriting. And so she made the connection between speech and the handwriting and the reading. But there is a connection. So that's not my expertise, because that is specialty. But what I always say about your village is find your village. And when you find your specialist, find somebody who will work with you as a parent, because she was golden in teaching me. And once she taught me, then I could give it to my kid. And so I literally took my cues from her, because I didn't really need a lot of interaction between the strategy she was giving me and her. And so they saw her very infrequently. It was more checking in to make sure they're making progress. So when I did what she said and I needed the next step, I had to go back. And so it was less, so if I had to use insurance or something like that, it's not, I mean, it was almost like a consult, you know, when you're in public school, or if you have to go privately and they're talking about paying out of pocket and you like cringe when you say consult, like, what am I going to do for a month? My kid needs to see you more than a month. It's not a big deal, because now they're getting it every day if you have somebody who's working with you to give you the strategy. And so it's very, very different as a homeschooler in getting service provision. But I definitely would say an occupational therapist or a speech and language pathologist would be the one to work with a reading and writing and language. Yeah.
Can you talk about developing an SEP for your gifted learner and how that's different? Because I know in the school system, they say IEP and it's pushed to special education students
Yeah.
that are trying to catch up. And a lot of times the gifted learners.
Yes, absolutely. So special education includes the whole spectrum from deficit all the way to gifted. And that's important too, because gifted learners are almost face as many challenges as students with deficit. And so I would say the same principles apply, because a lot of times when you have students who are gifted, sometimes what you will see is you will see things like if the gifts are missed, you'll see things emerge like anxiety, perfectionism. You'll see some of those things emerge, but a lot of times it's because you're missing the gifts and they're not being addressed. And so you definitely want to pay attention to those gifts. You want to figure out what they are. And those gifts, you have to also remember, are not always academic. And so that sometimes is also a challenge when they're not academic. But I would say you could definitely write an SEP for addressing those gifts, because it just keeps it in front of you, and so that you don't miss it. But definitely, the same principles would apply if it's a deficit versus a gift, but they need just as much attention as if you're writing an SEP for a deficit? That's a good question. Well, thank you very much. And don't forget, I have something for you. I have goodies for you.
Rochelle, thank you so much. You can go ahead and actually start handing out the giveaways, because I know you're going to want to get the information that Rochelle has to offer. And I know she was talking about she's with HSLDA, and she, at the very end of her presentation, you probably saw the slide with the QR code and the website and so forth. If you have not been on the HSLDA website yet, truly, it is such a wealth of information. I almost feel like it's any question you could have about homeschooling is answered, even if it's just to get you started and to let you know which direction to go. So make sure that you go visit that website, and then the additional resources that Rochelle is passing out, that you take advantage of those too. But we appreciate that wealth of knowledge. Thank you, Rochelle.